I'm an old woman now. Name's Eleanor Wells. Born in 1868 in a godforsaken brick corner of Blackburn, Lancashire. I've lived through coal smoke, war, hunger, cold winters with no shoes, and summers where your skin cracked from the soap at the mill. I wasn't born into comfort. My father, John Wells, worked at the dye house until his lungs rotted black with the fumes. He died spitting blood into a rag when I was 12. My mother, Mary, washed other people's laundry to keep us fed. She scrubbed until her hands were so raw they bled into the sheets. We lived in a 2-room flat on Mill Street, one room for sleeping, the other for living, if you can call it that. Wooden floorboards full of splinters, a stove that barely lit, and a bucket by the door for when you couldn't make it to the public privy in time. There was never enough coal, never enough bread, never enough of anything but noise. Noise from the neighbors, noise from the mill, and noise in your own head when you lay awake at night trying not to cry because your belly was twisting from hunger. I started working when I was 8. They called it helping mother. But it was work. Carrying bundles to the river, standing in cold water with red cracked feet, scrubbing clothes with a stone. And when I turned 10, my mother took me to the mill. "She's strong," she said. "She'll last." The foreman looked me over, spat on the floor, and said, "Don't last too long. They break quick, the small ones." And that was it. That was the beginning. No grand moment, no speech. Just me, a 10-year-old girl with stringy hair and holes in her socks, standing in a factory that smelled like grease and sorrow. If you want the truth, I didn't hate it at first. I didn't know anything better. The looms sang all day, loud enough to shake your ribs. Your hands moved on their own. Fix, twist, tie, duck, breathe, repeat. You weren't allowed to stop. Not for coughing, not for blood, not for anything. I was fast, though, quicker than most. That's probably why I made it past 12. The girl who worked next to me didn't. She got caught in the shuttle. Her arm was never the same again. She couldn't work. Her family sent her to the poorhouse. They used to call me 50 Error. Not because I messed up. I didn't. I was clean, sharp. They called me that because one day the machine logged 50 errors under my line. Wasn't my fault. Wasn't even my loom. But it didn't matter. I got the name. It stuck. They'd shouted at me across the yard, laughing like dogs. "Oi, 50 Error, you break the wheel again?" Funny how people laugh when they're afraid of you, or maybe jealous. I could outwork any boy there. I wasn't proud. I was desperate. That's not the same thing. Part 2, Blood and Blue Dye. By the time I was 16, I had shoulders like a man and calluses thick as bark. My hair was always tied back in a rag, stiff from the steam and dye dust. I'd grown tall, thin as a rake, with eyes that never smiled, not because I didn't want to, but because I'd forgotten how. That year, I was moved from the looms to the dye vats. Deeper work, hotter, harder, and filthier. The dye house stank of chemicals and sweat. The vats were big iron cauldrons where cloth was boiled and beaten in color. Blue was the worst. It seeped into your skin, turned your hands the shade of bruises. No matter how much you scrubbed, you'd always look like you'd been in a fight. And I had. Not with fists, with life. My foreman was Mr. Maddox, big man, with a face like an old potato and hands that liked to linger too long. He touched the girls. Everyone knew. Most kept quiet, but I didn't. I told him once, straight in the eye, "If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll drop a brick in the vat with your name on it." He laughed. "You think you scare me, 50 error?" "No," I said, "but I think pain does." He never touched me again, but he made sure I got the worst shifts, the dirtiest cloth, the heaviest bundles. I took it. I didn't complain. I couldn't afford to. That same year, my mother took ill. Something in her lungs. She coughed blood for weeks. We didn't have money for a doctor, so I took extra shifts. Stole bread when I had to. Boiled rags in salt water and pressed them to her chest. It didn't help. One night, she coughed herself into silence. Just stopped. I found her cold the next morning, her hand still holding the rosary she never finished. I buried her in a borrowed dress, in a borrowed coffin, under a sky that looked like wet iron. I was 17. Part 3. The Boy with the Book. I met Thomas Mercer on a Tuesday, standing outside the tannery, holding a book too clean for his hands. That's what caught my eye. Not his face, though he had a kind one. Not his coat, though it wasn't patched like most. It was the damn book. Nobody I knew read for pleasure. He looked up and caught me staring. "You want it?" he asked, holding it out like bread. I frowned. What would I do with a book? "Same as I do," he said. "Escape." I didn't take it. I didn't trust him, but I didn't forget him either. Next Tuesday he was there again. This time he had 2 books. One was for me. No words, just gave it to me, nodded, and walked off. I kept that book under my cot. I didn't read well, but I taught myself, bit by bit, every night after shifts when my fingers still stung and my back ached. Those pages were like windows. I started to believe maybe there was something outside Blackburn, something softer, something not soaked in dye and death. Thomas worked in the leather shop. He wasn't like the other boys. Didn't drink, didn't catcall, didn't laugh when I walked by. He asked questions, real ones, about my mother, about the mill, about what I wanted if I ever got out. Nobody had ever asked me that before. "What do you want, Eleanor?" I didn't know. "A bed that doesn't hurt my bones," I said once. "A day without coughing, maybe eggs." He smiled, and I hated how warm it made me feel. We started walking together, quiet walks, no promises. I didn't believe in those. But he talked, and I listened, and slowly I let myself soften, just a little. He kissed me behind the dye house one night. My hands were still stained blue. He didn't care. That was the first time I let someone touch me without flinching. For 6 months I thought maybe this was it. Not happiness exactly, but less pain. Something close to peace. Then he left. Just like that. No letter, no goodbye. Just didn't show up one Tuesday, or the next, or the next. I found out weeks later he'd gone to Manchester for work. Better wages, cleaner air, never came back, never wrote. I didn't cry. I sat by the river for an hour, holding the book he gave me, then dropped it in and watched it sink. It felt like the right kind of burial. That night, I lit a match and held my hand in the flame just long enough to remind myself what I was made of. Not paper, not silk, not meant for softness. Part 4. What it cost. By 20, I had lines in my face deeper than some women at 40. The dye house had chewed through my lungs, my fingers were bent from cold and wet, and my back had a permanent crook from hauling barrels that should have been lifted by two, and I was alone. There were girls who married mill boys, tried for babies and Sunday dresses. That wasn't me. I didn't believe in love after Thomas, and I didn't believe in luck. Not when I'd buried 2 sisters before I was 10, and my own mother in a churchyard hole the size of a coal bin. But I still needed to live, and living costs. So I started taking in side work, not honest work, men paid for company. Not all of them wanted flesh. Some just wanted someone to listen, someone who wouldn't laugh at their drunk crying or their broken teeth. But others, they wanted more. The first time I said yes, I was 21. His name was Mr. Pembroke, a clerk, not ugly, not cruel, just bored and lonely. He paid well, enough for coal and boots and a proper doctor when I thought my lungs were going. I never saw myself as that kind of girl. But when your stomach knots from hunger and your toes blacken in winter, pride dies quick. I didn't do it often, only when I had to, but it changed me. Made me see how men could hold power with just a glance, the way they looked at you like you were a thing, a treat, a passing thrill. One man tried to hurt me, locked the door, pushed me too far. I fought, got out with a cracked lip and a bruised shoulder, but I never went back to his kind. After that, I set rules. No regulars, no names, no kisses, and never in my own bed. By 25, I'd saved enough to move from Mill Street to a better room near the tannery. Still small, still damp, but it had a window, and when the light hit right, I could almost imagine it was a real home. I kept working, harder than ever. My hands were ruined by then. Bones thick with old breaks, nails always dark. But I had money tucked in a sock under the floorboard, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of freezing or starving. I still had no friends. Trust doesn't come easy when every kindness you've known ends in silence or betrayal. But I had something else. Will. And a fire in me that said, they'll not bury me like they did my mother, nameless and poor and pitied. Part 5. The Girl with the Broken Shoe. I was 31 when I met Ruthie. It was a gray morning, the kind where the clouds sag so low you feel them on your shoulders. I was walking back from the tannery, pockets light, lungs tight, when I heard a sound in the alley near Glover's yard. Not crying, not talking, just scraping, like a rat with a limp. She was sitting on the ground, barefoot, one shoe beside her, broken in half at the sole. Her coat was too big, her face too thin, dirt in her hair and a dead look in her eyes that I knew too well. She couldn't have been older than 7. I stared. She stared back. Didn't speak. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I saw my own ghost sitting there. Maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't care. I took a piece of bread out of my coat and tossed it near her. "Don't say thank you," I said. "It's not charity. I don't like thank you. She didn't say a word, just grabbed it, wolfed it down, and stared some more. The next day, she was in the same spot, and the next. On the fourth day, I brought a pair of socks and a boiled egg, left them without looking at her. She followed me home. Didn't ask, didn't knock, just walked in after me like she belonged there. I didn't send her away, didn't welcome her either. We didn't talk much. I didn't ask about her mother. She didn't ask about my past. She slept curled near the stove on a pile of old towels, didn't whine, didn't steal, just existed, quiet and watchful, like an animal learning to trust. One night, weeks in, I found her awake, staring at my hands. "They're ugly," she said. I nodded. "They've done ugly things." She didn't flinch. "Mine will be worse." That was the first time I felt something shift. Something in me cracked. Not open, but sideways. Like a bone that never healed right, suddenly remembering the pain. I never said I loved her. Not once. I didn't know how. But I started buying double at the market, left the stove on longer, washed her socks before mine. And once, when she got sick, a real bad fever, I sat up for 2 nights straight, pressing cold rags to her head and whispering things I didn't know I remembered. Lullabies, my mother's voice, my own name. When she came through it, she didn't thank me. I was glad. We never did become family. Not like in stories. But she stayed, and I let her. And that was more than I'd ever given anyone. Part 6. Smoke and Silence. The war started like a whisper in the street. Men in pubs arguing over maps they'd never seen, politicians' names they couldn't spell. I didn't care much at first. The world had always been cruel. Now it just had uniforms for it. But the factories cared. The men left, and the women filled the gaps. I was 45 then, too old for the new floor work, too smart for the bosses to ignore. So they brought me in to train the girls. Girls. Ha! Most of them hadn't held a hammer, let alone kept pace with a belt-fed assembly line. But they learned fast. Hunger's a better teacher than school. Ruthie was 14 by then, taller than me, sharper than a blade. She didn't smile much. Neither did I. But she asked questions constantly about wires, grease, how engines worked. She had a head for metal and hands that didn't flinch. I got her work in the munitions yard. Dangerous stuff, live powder, heavy lifting, long nights. But she was proud. First time I ever saw pride on her face. "Think they'll remember us after the war?" she asked once, scrubbing black grease from her fingernails. "No," I said, "but they'll remember the shells we built, the bombs we packed. That's something." One night, late, she came home with blood on her sleeve. Not hers. Explosion at the plant. 2 girls gone. Ruthie had dragged one out before the roof came down. I didn't ask how she was. She didn't tell me. We just sat at the table, drank tea gone cold, and stared out the window at nothing. That was life in wartime. You didn't talk about the fear. You walked past the rubble, past the dead pigeons in the gutter, past the posters screaming, "Your country needs you," and you went back to work. Because that's what women like us did. We kept the bones of the country from falling apart, and when the war ended, They thanked us, with silence. The men came back, took their jobs, their streets, their seats on the trams. We were sent home like tools no longer useful. The factory cut my hours. Ruthie's contract ended. No pension, no plaque, no mention. But we'd seen something, she and I, something the world couldn't unseen even if it tried. We weren't just women anymore. We were the backbone, the ash beneath the empire, the hands that never stopped moving, even when the world did. Part 7. The Last Stitch. I'm 83 now. My bones hurt when it rains. My hands tremble so much I can barely thread a needle, but I still try. Old habits die slower than people. I live in the same room, though the street has changed. They tore down the tannery, built a car park where the dye house used to be. Nothing smells like coal anymore. Everything's too clean, too quiet. I hate it. Ruthie doesn't live here. She visits on Sundays. Always the same time, always with bread and boiled sweets. She works in engineering now, wears trousers, speaks like someone who's been listened to. She calls me mother sometimes, though we never said those words out loud. I never earned them, not the way kind women do. But I gave her what I had, not warmth, not kisses, but truth, strength, a place to come back to. Last week she brought a child, her son, little thing, curious eyes, already asking too many questions. He stared at my hands for a long time. "What happened to them?" he asked. I said, "Work." He thought about it, then said, "They look strong." I smiled for the first time in weeks. They left after tea. Ruthie kissed my cheek. I didn't flinch. After they'd gone, I sat by the window, thought about everything I used to be, a girl with blue-stained hands and no dreams, a woman who fought and folded and kept standing. They'll never write my name in a book. No statues, no plaques, no songs. But Ruthie knows. That's enough. So if you're reading this, and you think a woman like me, someone called 50 error behind her back, someone who was never beautiful, never delicate, never soft, doesn't matter. You're wrong. I mattered. I still do. Not because I was loved, but because I lived.